Democrats, I wonder, some of these things are probably broadly popular, the mental health program, school security, but would Democrats in the Senate actually accept a deal that doesn't include some sort of gun restriction or gun reform?
We talked.
Is that really possible?
Yeah, we did something on this yesterday because I went and talked to some of the big progressives, the most liberal Democrats. We talked to Sanders, we talked to Warren, we talked to Mazie Hirono, we talked to Sherrod Brown, real progressives and real liberal Democrats, and you know what? They would take it. They would take it at this point. I do think there is a sense. And I think this is, that, and I think this goes back to a broader sense about the Senate itself. And you saw it, I think, in the infrastructure bill. And I think it goes into the same thing here. And I think you're seeing it kind of on the Electoral College Act and some of this other stuff is like, look, the Senate has to function some way. Yes, the Senate has been so bad. It got very bad under Harry Reid and McConnell. Nothing happened, and then there's been some progress in the last year and a half. They passed a major infrastructure bill that had been hung up for years. So they've been able to do some things together in a bipartisan way. I think there's a sense that, look, they have to show to the American public that, they're not going to there's not going to be universal background checks. That's not going to happen. There's not going to be an assault weapons ban. It's not going to happen. I don't think it could pass the House, and that's a Democratic-run House. Forget about that.
No, it certainly doesn't look like it.
No,
we'll talk more about that in a minute.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So there's zero chance it'll get through the Senate. So I think there is a realism among Senate Democrats, even the most liberal Senate Democrats, to say, look, I had a long talk with Warren about this. We'll take anything right now. Anything is better than nothing. And I do think there's a sense that, after Sandy Hook, there was a tremendous amount of emotion, and nothing happened, nothing changed. And I do think and you've talked about this, I do think there's a tremendous, I wouldn't underestimate this. There's a lot of emotion here, about this. This is, I think everyone's worried about gun violence as it is. And this is, the victims here it's so horrific. And in Buffalo, it's so horrific and it's racially motivated. And it's, I do think it goes back and also, I hate to say it this way, but we have two 18-year-olds, what's wrong with the country right now? And I think their feeling is that we've got to do something. And I feel this in both parties. We've got to do something. It is not no one is going to be happy with it. That's what comes out of this compromise. No one will be saying, well, that's, we're done on this issue. We'll never talk about it again. It's not there. But I do think that's the nature of compromise. Okay. We have, there's a reason 19 states have red flag laws, and including Florida. There is clearly, there clearly is some, strong support in law enforcement for the law enforcement organizations, police groups to say, look, we do have to be able to have families or law enforcement be able to intervene in some of these cases. It benefits society. So I do think there's a sense that we've got to do something, and I do think it's both sides. And I do think the liberal Democrats, I think they're realistic about this, and I do think a lot of it is Murphy himself on their side, because they trust Chris Murphy, because they know he really does care about this issue. And I do think on the other side, Cornyn has kind of that same cred with Republicans. They know he's not, he cares about gun rights. And he would, in anything, if John Cornyn signs off on it, it's going to be a reasonable piece of legislation, I would feel. And I do feel that kind of it play on both sides.
Yeah, I guess my thought on it is just when it comes to, the refrain of do something, which is, obviously what we hear oftentimes in the wake of these shootings. Usually Democrats mean do something to restrict firearms. And so I wonder if I could certainly see a package that includes school security measures and the mental health component that we described earlier, having very broad support in passing the Senate. But if it doesn't include something like the red flag grant bill or the juvenile criminal records, expansion for background checks, I just wonder if Democrats would accept that.
No, they wouldn't accept that.
That's what I mean.
I do think there has to be something. I think it's a good point. There has to be something on gun policy. I do think there has to be. It can't be just societal. A mental as important as mental health funding is. It can't. That's not going to be the full solution, or any real solution to guns. I don't think they could go to some of the gun control groups, every town and all, and say, this is what we've got. I think those groups would flip out. And
that's the issue. I think that I'm seeing with any sort of deal is like, I could see those two components being very popular and getting through if they were standalone or packaged together by themselves. But it'll be the harder part is getting agreement on the juvenile records thing seems like it's more complex in terms of, I'm sure every state has a different standard for how they deal with juvenile criminal records. And I
listen, I do think that the social justice groups, I do think they, if it goes too far the other way, I think they'll wade into this. I mean, sure. So when I do, like, as we mentioned, we have a long history of trying as a society, as a country, and I say, look, this, barring serious felonies, that the sins that you committed as a teenager, as a young person, shouldn't be, disqualify you for the rest of your life from,
right.
That's not. We're not talking about murder or something along those lines.
Sure.
This was a big debate going back to the 80s and 90s. Do we throw 13-year-olds in jail? Do we, what did I see? I saw the video of some 12-year-old or something trying to hold up a store the other day, armed. He was armed, so, do we hold, but we as a society, we have made a decision. We generally, barring major felonies, we don't hold the sins that you've committed as a teenager against you. So I do think this is, like you said, this is a very complex issue, and
I think that one's complex, but I think it's an easier lift than even the red flag bill, just because it deals with at least very serious crimes committed by juveniles. I'm sure that Tillis, at least from what Tillis, obviously. Right. You have to read whatever text comes out will be extremely important to scrutinize very closely.
And the other thing is here, as much as you see what senators say, senators are always more optimistic than staff, because staff has to get in there and draft the stuff and see, what's the precedent? What's the states? Where are the states on this position? What would this do to state law? If we change this at the federal level, what does that mean? What does that mean? What's a court going to look like? How are we going to explain this in legislative language in a way, that they don't have to come back in 2 years and fix it. So, staff is always much more wary about members, they're talking broad brushes. Yeah, we have a deal, but it matters as we said, especially on something like gun rights policy. This details matter. They are extraordinarily important. Yeah.
And I had a staffer tell me they're talking. I was asking about the realism of like a Friday deadline to come up with a framework, and they told me that the senators tend to be more optimistic, to put it nicely, about how those things turn out than the staff does. So,
because they got to actually draft it. Yeah.
Right. But to me, it seems like at least when you're talking about inclusion of juvenile records, you're talking about somebody who's actually been convicted of some sort of crime, presumably
it would have to be a felony, it would have to be some serious crime of
and probably more than just any regular even low-level violent felony. For instance, a fight.
In high school,
a high school fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Should that disqualify you from Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to deny him his Second Amendment rights as an adult,
Forever, for their whole
forever.
life. Right?
Exactly. How long is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Is it 5 years? Do they have to go through?
So, yeah, they'll have to.
Very complicated.
And maybe they can come up with some sort of expungement standard or something. But, it's there. I could see it being, the details on that one being very complicated.
Very difficult.
To me, the red flag law is more of a known standard in the sense that, like, at this point, it almost feels as though all the states that want to pass that policy have already done so. And so, I guess that's one of the appeals of doing the grant bill instead of a national red flag law, because basically it's sort of the Senate, the federal government is just saying, you can do this if you want, we'll give you some money to do it. But we're not forcing you. And so that makes it a little less controversial, but red flag laws are pretty well, it's starting to become a more entrenched position, like the Sullivan's ban or universal background checks, where there's a lot of sustained opposition from gun rights advocates over the details of how red flag laws work, and some of the concerns over, who can issue the red flag laws, what standard of evidence is required for that initial order, and then what standards required for the extension of the order. Are judges going to just rubber stamp every red flag law that comes across their desk out of a sense of caution? There's a lot of things.
Right, exactly. Which judge you want to be? I didn't grant a petition, and the guy went out and shot a bunch of people at the mall. God forbid. And I was reading. I don't know. Have you read through the McBath bill at all? The McBath Carbajal bill that come back. I'm sure you have. And they were talking the CBO, and the CBO was the Congressional Budget Office, which I don't even know how they came up with this number. It feels to me like throwing a dart at a dartboard. They're talking about like 10,000 petitions a year annually. If this bill was, if you read the report, if you read the actual report of the Judiciary Committee. And I'm like, how the hell did you come up with that number?
That seems really low.
I felt the same way, because but I do think they do. If you read the bill, they were serious about also frivolous claims, and
that's another thing.
An ex-wife trying to say, listen, my ex he's crazy, and he's got a 45 and he's going to go shoot up, because we do see that in relationships. There are claims, some dramatic claims made. And I'm not saying everyone is, but they're the passion of a breakup or something. People say things, but people do things and breakups also. So look, I was like, how the hell did they come up with that number? It just seems to me just like 10,000.